Hi, this is Kathy Atkinson. I'm the owner of Mind, Body, and Soul, and we're here today for a mini class, an online mini class on clay and diatomaceous earth. And so what my plan is today is to talk a little bit about clay, then we'll talk a little bit about diatomaceous earth, and then I'll do a little comparison of the two, and then I'll talk about how I use them for intestinal health. So clay is volcanic ash. So it's erupted and it's come to earth and it's landed in water or wherever it's landed, and it becomes what we consider clay. And because it's erupted from the earth, it actually, which is kind of cool, retains some of the energetic properties of the earth. If you can think of like a magnet and you get some magnet shavings, each of those little pieces of the shavings retain some of those magnetic properties of the magnet. And the clay does the same thing. It still has some of those energetic properties of the earth, which is kind of cool. Now, clay, you've probably heard, is shaped like a business card. So it's, that rectangular shaped business card. And the reason that that's important is because of the charge. So on the top and the bottom of the business card, which is that long piece, it has a negative charge. And then on the thin, narrow edges of the business card, it has a positive charge. So what that means is that as it's going through your system, it's going to be able to attract, it's got a large surface area on the top and the bottom of that card. It's going to be able to attract all those positive charged ions. Now, what has positive charged ions? Well, toxins, parasites actually do, bacteria do, radiation, heavy metals, those types of things that we don't want to have in our body. Well, because of this positive charge and negative charge of the clay, it's able to go through our body and attract those things to us. Now, what's kind of cool is that as the clay is going through our body, it remains suspended in fluid. So it doesn't get absorbed into our tissue, it doesn't get absorbed into our body. It remains suspended in the fluid, so as it's going through the body, it continues to attract those things that we don't want to have in our body anyway. And then the body is able to eliminate it. And when it eliminates the clay, it eliminates those toxins and parasites and radiation and heavy metals and all those things that I mentioned earlier. Now, clay does expand in water, which is kind of cool. Different types of clay will expand more, and so some of them expand so much that you may not want to use them because it could cause constipation. But the one that I'm going to be talking about today primarily is the bentonite clay. And so bentonite clay will expand some, but not so much that you wouldn't want to use it. But when it expands, it increases that surface area. So it has even more area that it's going to be able to attract the toxins to it that we don't want to have in our body. So as I mentioned, it expands. It has this positive or this negative charge on the top and the bottom, so it's attracting all the positive charged ions, which are the things that we don't want to have as it's going through our body. Now, one of the other things that it does is it fixes oxygen in the body, so it helps in the purification of our blood, so that's kind of cool too. I mentioned that it doesn't break down or get absorbed, so it remains suspended and it continues doing its good stuff as it's going through our system. It contains a lot of silica. And silica is important for bone health. It's important for hair and skin health. It also has other minerals, and so some people will use clay as like a mineral supplement. That's not what I use it for, but it's nice knowing that it has those benefits too. Now, one of the things that was kind of interesting as I was doing the research on this is that I was reading about how this Native American tribe had said that clay has a wisdom of its own. And I thought that was kind of cool. But what they meant by that was that clay kind of adapts to its environment. It knows where to go in the body and it knows what to do in the body. And it doesn't really cure the body, but it's a catalyst. And it helps the body detox, and it helps the body remove those positive charged ions from itself. which allows the body to heal itself. And so it acts as a stimulus, and it increases circulation. And this is kind of cool too. It balances the body pH. Now we hear a lot of people talking about the pH of the body, and the body does a really good job of maintaining its own pH, its internal pH. But clay helps balance. And so clay is one of those things that will support the body in maintaining health and homeostasis. Now, clay has been used throughout the world for a very long time. It's been used internally as well as externally. It's been used to help, pull those toxins out of the body that we talked about. And I even read about these dogs that were poisoned, but they survived because they were given clay water throughout the day for quite a while, and it was able to pull out the toxins of the poisons, which was really interesting. It's also used, of course, for dysentery. So if you've got constipation or diarrhea, it's been used for cholera. Those are some internal uses. But it's also been used externally for a long time. If you've got a burn, it helps with the burn. If you've got stings, I've got a friend who has a beehive, and anytime he gets a bee sting, he just goes and puts some clay on there and it pulls it right out. It's been used if you've got sores, even, and eczema or things like that. But even things like, I've heard about people using it with broken bones, and they put the clay pack on the site of the broken bone, and the bone heals faster, which is kind of interesting since you're applying it on the outside and not on the inside. But of course, used as a facial mask for acne or skin health. And you may have heard about people taking mud baths or having mud packs and those types of things. So clay has been very helpful throughout generations of time as both an internal supplement and aid, and used externally. Now, what about diatomaceous earth? So, I mentioned that clay was volcanic ash. Well, diatomaceous earth isn't volcanic ash. It's actually the fossilized skeleton of an ancient single-cell marine phytoplankton called a diatom. So it's a fossilized skeleton of a diatom, which is how we get diatomaceous earth. And rather than being a business card shape, this is kind of a cylindrical shape, kind of round, maybe with a hole in it, and it's got holes around the whole outside of it too. And it also has a primarily negative charge, which helps attract those positive ions to it. And it does not expand in water. So the surface area doesn't increase, but it still goes through the body and attracts those positive charges to it, the toxins and the radiation and the heavy metals and the parasites and the bacteria and those types of things. It does that. But the neat thing about diatomaceous earth is that the fossilized skeleton of these diatoms has kind of jagged edges, and so it's a little bit sharp. Not too sharp for us that it's going to damage, or harm us. But what it does do is, as it's going through our body, as it's going through our system, it's kind of scraping clean the walls of our intestinal tract, which is kind of cool. But also, as it comes into contact with any of parasites or bacteria, remember it's attracting it to our body because of the opposite charges. But as it attracts it to the body, because of the sharp edges, it also slices it and cuts it and helps kill it. It is, I want to make sure that you guys understand, it is safe for us to use both internally and externally, but the external use isn't quite the same as with the clay. So you wouldn't really do a poultice of diatomaceous earth if you had a burn or an insect bite or something like that. But what the external use of diatomaceous earth is that it's used for like pest control. So remember how I mentioned that the exoskeleton or of the diatom is kind of sharp? Well, when it comes in contact, just like in our intestinal tract, when it comes in contact with the parasite or the bacteria or whatever, and it slices it, it does the same thing in food storage. So people will sprinkle it on their grain for food storage. People have used it for getting rid of fleas on their pets. People have used it in their garden as a natural pest control because it has that ability to kind of cut the parasites that it comes in contact with. And again, remember that it's totally safe for us, but it does this, it punctures the exoskeleton of the insects, and then it causes them to dehydrate and to die. So it does some really great things. It does have a lot of silica in it as well. So I mentioned that clay has silica. Well, the diatomaceous earth is about 84% silica, and the other 16% is 20 different minerals. Now, I mentioned before too that silica is really important because it's going to support our bone health and our joint health and our skin health and our hair health. Hair health, yeah. And so because there's so much silica in it, it's really good. It helps us on the outside by supporting our inside. So if that makes sense, you use it internally and you get external benefits. So let's talk about a little bit of the comparison between the two. You know, both diatomaceous earth and bentonite clay clean internally. They're both going to go through the system and they're going to pull out things that we don't want. They both pull the toxins, they both pull the radiation, they both pull the heavy metals, they both pull those positively charged ions because they are primarily negatively charged, okay? The diatomaceous earth is a little more abrasive. The clay is not so much. So the diatomaceous earth, as it goes through our system, it's going to be cleaning and kind of scrubbing the walls of our intestinal tract. Some people will even use it for like as a cleanser on their countertops, but not so much the clay. The clay is good for burns and bruises and bug bites. That's not something that you'd want to use diatomaceous earth for. But the diatomaceous earth is good externally for pest control. The clay, not so much. And because of that scrubbing action I mentioned, that diatomaceous earth is sometimes used as a household cleanser. And it's also used to preserve grains. Now, you can put bentonite clay on your hair as like a mud pack or on your skin, and it will nourish the skin. You wouldn't want to do that with diatomaceous earth. It would actually, dry it out. But again, with diatomaceous earth, you take it internally for external benefits. Okay. They both contain trace minerals. They both contain silica, but the diatomaceous earth, I think, has a little bit more silica in it than the bentonite clay. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I know from my personal experience, I feel more benefit in my hair and my skin from the bentonite clay, from the diatomaceous earth use than I do when I'm using the bentonite clay. I still get great benefits from bentonite clay, but I specifically noticed improvement with my hair when I used the diatomaceous earth. And the diatomaceous earth is probably a little more cost effective. It's usually a little bit less expensive than the bentonite clay is. So how do I use them for intestinal health? Well, I use them both, actually. I don't use one or the other. I like to have the clay on hand for first aid, but I also use it internally as part of my overall digestive system protocol, if that makes sense. So what I would do is when I first started, I would start with maybe like 1/4 teaspoon of clay, and I would put that in a cup of water, and I would stir that up, and I let it sit for a minute to kind of, dissolve a little bit, and then I stirred it up some more, and would drink that 1/4 teaspoon of clay in the cup of water, and I did that every day for about a week, and then the next week I increased it to 1/2 teaspoon of clay in a cup of water. And then the week after that, I increased it to 3/4 teaspoon of clay in a cup of water. And then the 4th week, I was up to the full recommended dose of a teaspoon of clay in a cup of water. Now, I have had friends who using even 1/4 teaspoon of clay was too much. And what do I mean by too much? Well, with both bentonite clay or diatomaceous earth, you can get a die-off. As it's going through the system, if there's things that are being pulled or killed, or the parasites or bacteria are being killed, when they are killed, they release toxins, and sometimes you get what's called a Herxheimer's reaction, or a die-off or a detox reaction, and sometimes you'll feel like you have the flu or just, kind of feeling run down. But for the friend that I was just talking about, she got a rash. She got rashes and hives all over. I don't know if she got hives, but she got rashes all over her body because her body was trying to detox. And so because the skin is the largest organ of elimination, when she used even 1/4 of a teaspoon of clay in that cup of water, it was too much for her body. And so she began to have this rash. So if it was me, I would start with maybe the 1/4. If you think that you might have a lot of toxic buildup and a lot of toxins that you want to get rid of, then maybe use a little bit less than that. Maybe if it was me, I might use an 1/8 of a teaspoon to start with or something if I thought I had a lot. But generally speaking, people are okay using 1/4 of a teaspoon of clay in a cup of water, stirring it up, and then drinking that. And like I said, I did that every day for a week, and then the next week I increased it to 1/2 a teaspoon of clay, and then the next week I increased it to 3/4 of a teaspoon of clay, and then the next week I increased it to the full teaspoon of clay. And then after that I just did a teaspoon of clay in a cup of water every day. Now, when did I incorporate my Diatomaceous Earth? So when I learned about Diatomaceous Earth, I was already using my clay water every day, and it had great benefits. But because of the cleansing action of the Diatomaceous Earth, I wanted to try that too. And so I started just kind of alternating between the two. And I would do the same thing with the Diatomaceous Earth. I started, I think, at first with maybe just 1/2 a teaspoon of Diatomaceous Earth in a cup of water. And then the next week I used a teaspoon. And that's when I was kind of noticing, I started using just the Diatomaceous Earth for a while too, and I noticed that my hair was feeling like fuller and thicker, which was kind of nice. And now, to be honest, what I do is just muscle test to see which one my body needs for that day. But I will every day use either the clay or the Diatomaceous Earth as part of my intestinal health protocol. Now, I am sure that there are going to be a ton of questions. I try to keep these mini classes pretty short to get you some information, and I don't want to overwhelm you. Most people don't like to spend an hour on watching a video. So if you have questions about clay or Diatomaceous Earth, or things that you've heard, or something maybe that I talked about that you have a question about, or how else I might use them, please, in the comments below, just write your question. And then tomorrow I'm going to have on my website, I'm going to write a blog post, Clay and Diatomaceous Earth Q&A, and I will answer all your questions there, hopefully. I'll answer as many as I can, and I'll publish that tomorrow, and you'll be able to get all the answers to the questions that you have. So thank you so much for joining me. Again, my name is Kathy Atkinson. I'm the owner of Mind, Body, and Soul. My website, if you don't know it, is mindbodyandsoulonline.com. And you can post your questions below. Check out the Q&A tomorrow, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.